Back in 10 seconds then.
All right, folks, we are back for another edition of the binding status here. We are going to go ahead and get started. Just wanted to quickly apologize for the angle you're getting of me right here. I am not in my normal working conditions due to the coronavirus and all the stuff surrounding that. Also wanted to just start off with saying I hope everyone is safe. I hope that also that this show today can be kind of a nice break from some of the stress you're feeling. And we aim to make this a really interactive, personal show. So please feel free to drop your name in the chat, tell us where you're joining from, just ask questions, comments, that sort of thing. And we're happy just to have a conversation here. Now more than ever, we want to make people feel welcome and have this be a community where you're comfortable sharing and joining in. So really thankful that you're joining today. I'm also extremely grateful to have Alex Ellis joining today as our co-host. If you haven't heard of Alex before, you probably live under a rock. He does a lot of different things. Namely, some of the things we're going to look at today are his two projects, OpenFaaS and Inlets. But he has numerous other projects including KTUP or K3SUP, Arcade, and then contributing to a variety of different things that I can't even list off all of them. So we're very grateful to have Alex on today. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to him to kind of give his own introduction of himself and talk about anything that he wants to.
Thanks, Daniel. Yeah, so I don't know who's actually here from the OpenFaaS community or from my network on Twitter, but welcome to everybody that could make it. We're going to be looking at how we can use Crossplane and OpenFaaS together today. And I really like this combination ever since Daniel first sort of told me about what it could do. I'd heard of Crossplane, but I didn't really understand what it was meant to do. And so the thing that I really got from that is you can take a Kubernetes cluster running on your laptop, on a Raspberry Pi, or on a cloud, and then create a custom resource definition and say, I'd like to have some storage, I'd like to have a database, and the Crossplane controller will go off and make that for you, and then inject the secrets so that you can start using them. And that's what we're going to show you today. And I think it works really well with OpenFaaS, right? So we really aren't that interested in managing data and databases and S3 buckets. We do want a great experience for compute functions, microservices, and we always need data, right? We always need something, whether it's running inside the cluster or managed. I think that combination works really well.
Awesome. Thanks for that intro, Alex. And I wanted to take a brief moment to welcome a few people to the chat. We have Jared joining from San Diego. Marcus, both Jared and Marcus work on Crossplane. And then Jan, who's been on the last couple shows, he's joining from Berlin. Thanks for joining. He's also jumped into contributing to Crossplane. Anyone else who's watching, please feel free to introduce yourself, as Alex just did in the chat as well, and we will give you a shout out. First thing we wanted to look at just briefly here, because that's not really what the show is necessarily about, but we want to look at the release notes from the Crossplane release yesterday. And we're also going to briefly look at the Kubernetes release notes, as it also released version 1.18 yesterday. So I'll start by sharing my screen here. So here we're looking at the Crossplane release notes. These are just a few highlights here. We try to keep it succinct, but also include all new functionality. So what you'll see here is some additional support for NoSQL databases. Artur Souza from Microsoft actually added that. So thanks to Artur. And we're going to have support for things like Mongo, and some other NoSQL offerings like Dynamo, et cetera, coming in Crossplane. There's also been an update to Kubernetes applications where they basically are better at managing resources in remote clusters. So we had some issues with old controllers that were not performing updates as we wanted. So that's been smoothed out and also just updated for more readability in the code. I know Marcus, who's on the call, worked on this ability to run Crossplane, restricting any extension type from getting RBAC permissions to core Kubernetes API groups, which helps lock down some security. And otherwise, you're able to schedule directly to Kubernetes target, which means you can pick any Kubernetes cluster to schedule your resources. And we've also added a package type to the installation unit. And we're really standardizing around these 4 type of install types. We're not going to talk about that too much today, but I'm sure in a future show we will touch on it. Last thing I want to do before jumping into OpenFaaS is just hop on over to the Kubernetes release notes over here. It is a very verbose write-up that you can look at all the different things that are happening. Mainly here, I just wanted to give a shout out to the Kubernetes release team and all the folks who work to get in all these different features. There are a lot of new enhancements in this release. And specifically, if you are looking at Client Go, there's a bunch of different changes there with passing context around. So you'll definitely want to look into that if you use Client Go for your project. With that brief update, I wanted to give the floor back over to Alex, and I'll kind of ask him a few questions about OpenFaaS, and we can generally explore the docs. So starting off, when did you create OpenFaaS? Why did you create it? What was kind of the motivation behind it, and how has it grown since then?
Yeah, so OpenFaaS has got quite a rich history now, and it's one that sort of changed through the years. We had the 3rd birthday of the project in December last year, and had like an online party. There's a blog post about that, a nice cake graphics that somebody made for us. And you know, over 3 years ago now, I was trying to learn about serverless and FaaS, and I didn't understand the difference between the two. I started to use Amazon's Lambda product, where you write some code in a zip file and they'll run it for you. And you know, I really liked containers at the time, and I wanted to find a way of unlocking that potential so that it could run on any cloud, and we could take that idea of running a snippet of code, whether it's a small one or something a bit bigger, like a container, and being able to take that to any cloud, any computer, any device, and run it in exactly the same way. And that was like the 0.1 of OpenFaaS. It was called FaaS back then. And then added metrics through Prometheus, scaling through Alert Manager, and various other parts into the project to make it more of a complete platform for writing applications.
Awesome. Well, it's definitely seen a lot of adoption by the community and a lot of different folks finding the usefulness and the simplicity that it provides. In my experience, it's basically the easiest way to get to running your code on Kubernetes or some other platforms, which we'll talk about later. But could you tell us a little bit about the community, and especially as a community leader, what your philosophies are for managing the community, empowering people, bringing on new contributors, and that sort of thing?
Yeah, so if you scroll down a little bit on the homepage, you can see how much of a focus there is on community, when you'll see like a random selection of people that have contributed. Now, you can get on here whether you've sent a PR to change one letter in a file, whether you've contributed an entire feature. I actually see you there, Daniel, at the bottom. Trying to remember what it was that you did there. So it was quite recent.
I think it was
updating a Golang version. I think it was.
Oh yeah, that's right.
Right, and so even something as small as that, if there's somebody new, it's probably me that you'll be interacting with. It might be somebody else. I will try and give you like an expedited experience if I can, give you a quick win, find something that you can have success with, not a big feature that you'll get stuck on and might get sort of harder to sort of push through. And so, yeah, we've got a random selection of people on here. And at the top row, there's Stefan. Stefan's one of the core contributors to the project. And if you click on the team page on the top right, you'll see that there's a few folks that have sort of stepped up, that have a bit more responsibility and that commit a bit more time on a regular basis. And so we've got a governance structure in the contributing guide that describes the difference between being just around, being a member, and being a core part of the project. And for each of those levels, there are different expectations, but also different rewards and different things that you're going to get out of it. And yeah, managing a community is very time consuming, and really you only get out of it what you put into it, because what I find is that every person needs a personal relationship at some level, whether that's with me or with one of the other contributors, in order to stay around and to be interested and to kind of develop the project.
Definitely. And I personally have found when I've interacted with the OpenFaaS community and the projects that kind of surround that, that you are very hands-on in that, you know, when a new person comes, it's likely you, like you said, that are reaching out to them. And I think that gives a lot of validity to the project where you're immediately kind of talking to the head decision maker. So that's something I really admire about the way you run the project. And I think it's been really effective. Now kind of moving on to probably the first question that someone's going to ask when they encounter OpenFaaS. How do you go from, you know, having some code, having an application you've written to running it on OpenFaaS, and what are the different options for doing that?
Yeah, so until recently, we didn't have this on the homepage. We always had it on the README file here. But if you go back to the main homepage, Alistair, who's one of the newest contributors, actually, he's now a GitHub member. He put together this section. I love it, and it basically shows you. If you look at the node example, that's quite a popular one. The first one, you can use our CLI to scaffold out basically everything you need. So if you know you want Node.js version 12 in JavaScript or TypeScript, you simply run this FaaS CLI new, put the language name there, and it will create the text for you. Now, if you've ever deployed something to Kubernetes, you will know that you probably need a Docker file, you need a service file, a deployment file, an ingress, a certificate. You probably need a handler. You need an index file. You need a package JSON. Have I missed anything? I probably missed a few things there, right? And so it gets very overwhelming very quickly. Whereas on that first tab, you see that you run the one command. It gives you just the text that you fill in. And when you deploy that with FaaS CLI up, you've got a working endpoint, right? You can edit that. But if that isn't suitable for the workload that you have, let's say you've got an existing Ruby on Rails app, you can use a Dockerfile approach. That's the fourth tab there on your screen. And here you can see we just do from Ruby, copy the files in, run bundler, and then we're literally starting the server. It might be Sinatra or something like that we're running. And that means that you can bring one of our templates along and use it as is or edit it. You can use a Docker file, or you can actually go and use any binary that you've already got. And we have this thing called the watchdog that can sit in front, and every time it gets a request, it can run your binary. So we've got just about everything possible to make sure that you can run your code.
Awesome. And yeah, one of the things that is evidenced here by me just looking through the documentation as you speak is that there is a lot of great documentation here on the OpenFaaS website, and it's also just very aesthetic. So definitely something that's really useful. And I appreciate that these architecture diagrams are right in here because some of the beauty is in the simplicity of the architecture. And it's nice that basically with pretty simple diagrams, you can explain exactly what's happening, but it still is a really powerful system. And you kind of hear regularly that the most powerful systems are the ones that provide a lot of value, but are also simple. So that's really apparent here. Moving on to kind of separating OpenFaaS from Kubernetes because it's not strictly tied to it. And you'll see that if you go to the Getting Started documentation. Can you talk about kind of how OpenFaaS interacts with Kubernetes and how it may run outside of it?
Yeah, if you click on I think it's deployment, isn't it? What you'll see is Kubernetes is what we're recommending for production and for work usage. But then you don't have to feel like Kubernetes is hard or super complex because for one, we do a lot for you so that you don't have to get into the weeds of it. And two, there's a project from Rancher Labs called K3S that provides a really lightweight version of Kubernetes that you can use instead. And it's also production ready. It's not just for ARM devices. But in this document, you'll see that there's a slightly newer project called FASD. And FASD takes the heart of those components in Kubernetes like Containerd and CNI, which are both CNCF projects. And it layers them so that you just have a single machine instead of a cluster that's already much simpler, no networking to worry about. It still uses the heart of Kubernetes Containerd to run your containers. You still get the full OpenFaaS API, but it's so much simpler. And so we're starting to see some interest around that, and that could be a good option for you if you feel like you don't need a cluster, you just want to run a few functions. It's quite easy to set up. Love to get some feedback from people, particularly if you think, right, I've got some JavaScript, I need to handle a Stripe API hook. I don't want to pay $300 a month for an Amazon cluster. You can pretty much deploy this on the cheapest VM you can find.
Awesome. Yeah, this looks really cool. I've been experimenting with it a little bit, but I definitely need to dive in a little more. And I like that you support the different platforms that kind of have different levels of complexity and also different use cases. So on a previous episode, which I know Alex was tuned in for as he kind of helped out in the chat, we took a look at K3S and running that on a Raspberry Pi. And it's a very simplified version of Kubernetes that makes it a lot easier to get started, and you can run on things like a Raspberry Pi. So one of the things I wanted to ask, given that you do allow running OpenFaaS on all these different platforms, what are the challenges around doing that? Obviously, standardizing on a single platform may allow you to move faster in the short term, but you're going to sacrifice some of that flexibility as well, and you're not going to be able to meet people at all these different levels that you mentioned. So could you talk a little bit about some of the challenges around that?
Yeah, I mean, if you think about the way OpenFaaS started, because it was so long ago, it actually looked like Docker Swarm had a better user experience, was getting more traction, had more money being poured into it, and was potentially going to be the winner in the orchestration space. That changed, and it's pretty clear that it's Kubernetes now. And so for a while, or even up to today, we've supported this OpenFaaS API, which is CRUD for functions, create, retrieve, update, delete, list, etc. CRUD for secrets, and retrieving logs. And those are the things that we've supported against our API. And then behind that API, you can do whatever you want. So there's an OpenFaaS that can deploy to Lambda. There's an OpenFaaS that can deploy to Fargate. But as far as I'm concerned, if you're going to production, use Kubernetes. OpenShift works too. FASD is a newer, interesting project for some use cases. And the Swarm support is still active, and it barely needs any support from the project. It just is very stable. One of the reasons for that might be because Docker isn't particularly changing it much right now. And we've got to see what the future is going to be for that, whether Mirantis is going to invest in it, whether it's just something that we need to wind down and sunset over time.
Definitely.
With that, one of the challenges then is that, and I think we encountered this, is in Swarm, I don't know if this has changed, but every secret was like a one-to-one mapping. You can have one secret backed by two different files. In Kubernetes, you can. And that's why the OpenFaaS API by default, when you create secrets to the CLI, it's a one-to-one mapping. And I think, as you found out, Dan, you can actually go and use kubectl to create secrets that have got multiple files within a single named secret. But in Swarm, I'm pretty sure that you can't do that. Maybe, I don't know if it's changed. So there's an example. And so we sort of made the experience slightly worse to support both. And there's other things like that too, like there's no cron jobs in Swarm. So there's no cron jobs in OpenFaaS. We did manage to get around that by creating something called the cron connector. So another part of OpenFaaS is having events, and you'll see, I think we call it triggers in the reference guide.
Let's see. I know I saw this earlier.
The reference, we've got triggers.
Nice.
And a lot of people wrongly assume OpenFaaS only supports HTTP. It doesn't. We also have an asynchronous built in with NATs by Derek at Synadia. you can invoke it via the CLI. There's Apache Kafka, AWS SQS as a third-party trigger. VMware vCenter events can trigger functions. S3 can, cloud events. And one of the ones, as I just mentioned, is this cron connector. So rather than using the cron in Kubernetes, we've got this external component that has its own cron scheduler, ticks along, and then invokes the function through our API, right? And so if we only supported Kubernetes, something like Knative, or trying to think of any others, maybe Kubeless, and then we could just use cron and bubble that up, right? But instead, we've taken a slightly more abstract approach.
Definitely. And one thing I wanted to mention from that conversation where we were talking about using Kubernetes secrets with multiple fields and that sort of thing, OpenFaaS does actually, if you provide that single secret in the configuration, which we'll look at later, it does just take each of those fields and basically expose them to your function as their own secret. So you can still read them and use multi-field secrets in Kubernetes. So that's a really nice user experience. Last thing I wanted to touch on before we move into doing some demos is, we talked a little bit and we're going to show later about getting data to your functions, essentially. How do you go about using databases and other data sources, and how do you handle connection pooling and all that sort of thing?
Yeah, I mean, it might be a good time just to dive into one of the code files, that particularly the init part of what we've both been working on. And so within Go, there's a library, PG, I think it's called. And if you look right at the top, what it allows you to do is open a DB connection, and then it has pooling built in. And so we can open that up when the function starts, and then all of the requests get managed through that. If the connection goes idle, that will drop, but then it will reconnect for you. There's similar available for MongoDB. I've been using that with Python, also been using it with Node.js recently. And because the OpenFaaS functions or containers can stay around for some time if you want, that connection's just always there. Right? And so you don't necessarily have this problem of every request starting a new database connection. You can share one, and this seems to work pretty well.
Awesome. Well, we'll definitely see that as we dive into some of the demos here, which I'm going to go ahead and start with. So our first one today is going to be an S3 image uploader. So I'm going to hop over here to the TBS repo. As returning viewers know, we always make all of our apps and our manifests and that sort of thing publicly available. So they're in the TBS repo, or in this case, we're going to have some in a repo that Alex created. So all of this will be available to you if you want to run it afterwards. We'll provide guides for doing so. So we're going to run through that here, though, just so you get a little more hands-on experience. So the first thing we're going to do, we're going to be running on Kubernetes today because Crossplane runs on Kubernetes. So we're going to start off with just creating a kind cluster. So if you're not familiar with kind, it basically allows you to run local clusters within Docker really easily. And if you have it installed, you can just kind create cluster, provide a name, and it's going to spin that up for you. To give you a bit of an overview of what all we're going to do, we're basically going to install Crossplane. We're going to do that using Arcade, which is another one of Alex's projects, which basically allows you to install different applications that run on Kubernetes. So whether they're a Helm chart, customize, or something like that, any configuration, you can all do it through this one CLI, basically. And it does make it a lot easier. As you'll see, we'll use it to install Crossplane. We'll use it to install OpenFaaS. I can't remember. We're going to use it to install the Inlets operator. We may not.
As I was trying to sort of set up Crossplane last night, I saw that there was, a whole bunch of instructions that took different variables and had to interpolate it with a string and create a file, then apply the file. And that's the kind of thing that we can do with Arcade. Is we can effectively take what could be a particularly complex installation experience and make it a one-liner with some flags, and that's what we're really trying to do there.
Definitely. That's a great point. And you're going to see that right here, that as we just do this, if you've looked at the Crossplane installation instructions, it can be somewhat complex. We're still going to have to do some of that credential providing to add our different providers. But Alex was talking to me before this and talking about how we could incorporate that flow into the Arcade installation command, which would make it just a lot easier. And right now with Helm, you can actually specify that you'd like different providers to be installed. But for this demo, we're going to do it manually just to kind of show how that works. So starting off, we're going to be using the 0.9 version of Crossplane, which was released yesterday. So we should be able to see that our pods are running if we go up a bit. So you'll see Crossplane and the Crossplane Stack Manager are installed and running. I am also going to...
And those are the things I was talking about earlier, where you say, here's a custom resource that says I want a storage bucket. This is the manager, the controller that observes that and goes and creates the external outside of Kubernetes, and then updates your secrets where you've asked for them to be injected.
Yep. So the core Crossplane controller is kind of doing the abstraction of that. So it's providing things like the general bucket. And then we're going to install the AWS controller, which actually handles the communication with AWS. And then the Stack Manager is basically just taking that AWS controller and installing it with the appropriate permissions and that sort of thing in terms of RBAC roles. So we're going to install this provider AWS. So if we look into what that manifest actually looks like, it's going to be right here. So it's pretty simple. We're creating an AWS namespace, and then we're doing a cluster stack install. That Stack Manager is watching for this cluster stack install, and it is going to pull the specific image of provider AWS and get the controllers running and install all of its CRDs. That's custom resource definitions, if you're not familiar with Kubernetes, which are basically going to represent the different specific types that AWS supports. So we can go ahead and do so. And what you'll see here is this init container. So this is what the Stack Manager is basically using to install the different CRDs. So it's all bundled into here. And once it is finished, it will start up the controller as well with the appropriate RBAC in the AWS namespace. So you'll see that it is now completed. And if we watch here, it looks like the controller is already running. So that's what's going to see when we create different AWS resources and then actually reach out to AWS to do that. In order to be able to talk to AWS, as you would expect, we have to provide some credentials. We have a few scripts to help you with doing this on the Crossplane website. Obviously, it's dependent on what kind of permissions you want to give the role that you're going to give to Crossplane. For today, I'm going to do it with a pretty simple script that I have that's using my locally set up AWS config. So I'm going to do that briefly. We're not going to focus on that, but we may see a little bit later how you can do this with GCP as well.
This is basically setting up a service account or and associating with a role that has the particular permissions that are needed, right? So in the AWS S3 example, that is going to mean that you can create an S3 bucket, maybe do something else with it.
Exactly right. And if you're creating all the different resources that AWS supports, you're going to need pretty wide permissions. But if we're only ever going to be creating buckets with this provider, then you can provide those credentials. And then on each class, which is basically saved configurations for how you apply something, you reference the provider. So we just created the provider named AWS provider. We could have called it, restrict only bucket provider or something like that. And then you can kind of use different credentials for different parts of your organization to do different things. So now that that's created, we can create our S3 bucket class, which is what we were just looking at. You'll see this has pretty common permissions that you provide when creating an S3 bucket via the API or in the UI. And creating a class instead of an S3 bucket object is saying, I want to store this configuration for use later on. So the actual controller is not going to do anything when we create this. It's just going to store this in etcd as a CRD. And then later when we create a claim that references it, that's scheduled to it, then it's going to create an actual S3 bucket instance, then go create that. So we'll quickly do that. So you can see that was created. And now if we create our general bucket class, so this could be satisfied by different configurations of buckets, or, storage provider on AWS, GCP, et cetera, or it could be something like Rook, which provides in-cluster storage. But essentially when we create this, I've run this before with creating, well, actually, we'll go ahead and do that. So I'm creating it in the OpenFaaS namespace, so the secrets will be propagated there, but I haven't installed OpenFaaS yet. We can go ahead and do that.
You need to do that.
Right.
And I think if you don't, and I ran into this earlier, if the database is in another namespace, like if you use Arcade, you can actually install Postgres directly into your cluster, install it in the default namespace. And then to access that from OpenFaaS, you should specify .default in the host name. So that's something that that I was doing just a bit earlier. Wrote a new tutorial how to do a to-do app with Postgres and Golang. A little bit similar to the two applications you'll see today.
Awesome. So once again, we're going to use Arcade to install OpenFaaS here.
Are you going to add the load balancer to that, or we're not?
I don't think we'll need it.
We're not doing that now, are we? No. Okay.
So we can check here and see that OpenFaaS pods are getting started up. So you can see container creating. We should see that there are some namespaces. So like the OpenFaaS function namespace is where we're going to store our functions. That's also where I'm going to create the bucket. That's why it failed to create last time. So now if I do create the bucket, we're going to see those created. And if I get this, the nice thing about the bucket is that it provisions very quickly. It's very easy for AWS to create the bucket. So you'll see that we're using that class that we created, and we've also created a resource, which is kind of an interpolation of the bucket name and the namespace.
I've got to say, I've just learned that you can do -f for get. I didn't know
really?
that.
Yeah, I use it pretty frequently because it's a lot easier than.
I think I'm going to use it as well. I didn't know you could do that.
Well, I'm glad we're all learning here. So if we look for actual S3 buckets, you'll see that Crossplane created one for us when we created the claim. And so it's creating an actual instance of that object with the configuration from the class that was scheduled from it. And it's been created. So we can now use this. And if we actually look at the secrets in the OpenFaaS function namespace.
Right. Yeah.
Yep.
We got the bucket there.
Yep. So you'll see that we have 3 fields in that secret. So we're talking about those multi-field secrets in Kubernetes. And we are going to pass those secrets in to our functions. And this is where we're getting to the configuration that Alex was talking about earlier for OpenFaaS. Alex, do you want to briefly kind of run through exactly what these different fields here do and what all you can configure?
Yeah, so we're kind of looking at a YAML file here, but not like the ones that everyone's complaining about. These ones are much, much simpler. We call it stack YAML. There's also a quick reference page in the OpenFaaS docs. And the kind of things that you want to do here are say, this is generated, by the way, when you do FaaS CLI new, is maybe from there you want to customize it with an environment variable. 12-factor apps became really popular with containers. What would you do? You might set the name of a bucket with that. You might set whether debug is on or not. We cover this in the OpenFaaS workshop that's online for free. And you might also want to specify a number of secrets that you want to have here. We've got the language template name, what folder the code is in under the handler, and the image name where we're going to upload that. And this is important to know, is that Kubernetes runs container images. So every time we want to change our code, we've got to build a new container image, push it into a registry, and then deploy that. And so FaaS CLI up is a command we have there, but it's 3 commands: build, push, and deploy. And the deploy step is going to read this file, look at all of these variables, and decide how that should be put into your cluster.
Definitely. And one of the things that I really like about it, which may be something kind of small, is that if I'm using, let's say I have 6 functions in here, if I need to build new images for all of them, if I just do fast CLI build with the template, then it's going to build all those for me. And then when I do push, it's going to push all of them for me. So it's, every new function that you have in every image, it's saving that many commands for you.
Do you know about the parallel?
No, I don't think so.
Maybe you could try it today. Dash dash parallel, you can build concurrently, and this is something even Docker Compose could never do. Of those 6, let's say we build 3 concurrently, we can then use all of the CPUs in your machine to run through that even faster than we could before.
Awesome. Well, yeah, we can definitely try that out. So that bucket is ready. The secrets are ready. One thing I mentioned earlier was that when you have multi-field secrets, OpenFaaS will use each of those fields on the secret as their own. So if we look at something like the uploader here, you'll see that I read secrets for each of these. So endpoint, username, password. Those are all fields on the secret we're passing to it. So they get created as their own kind of like OpenFaaS passed secrets. So that makes it really easy to cross-bind.
And we read them from disk, right? So one of the things Docker Swarm sort of outlined from very early on was not to use environment variables for confidential data, because they can easily be leaked, and they're very sort of you can configure them securely in Kubernetes, but it can be hard to do that, and people take shortcuts. So in this way, we know we're going to get a file on disk that's ephemeral, that's temporary. We can read, and we can even go and change that without reloading the whole deployment, which is really neat.
Definitely. I am going to also log in to OpenFaaS here, which is going to be allowing us to deploy different things to it. So you'll see, let's see, connection refused. Oh, wait, I'm not port forwarding yet. That would be an issue. So let me port forward the service here. And then we should be able to log in just fine. All right, so that should be running for us. And looks like credentials are saved here. So I'm also going to briefly show the UI here. So I will copy that password that we just got over in to my copy paste. And if we look at, if I can get the browser open here, we should be able to go to localhost 8080.
Yeah,
it's going to ask for credentials.
Log in. It's always admin, and the password's generated each time. People used to sort of get confused and forget the password and not know how to get it back again. There's a few ways of doing it. We've got that in the docs. But one way is to run arcade info OpenFaaS, and it will give you the command.
Awesome. All right, so we're logged in, and we've already created our bucket here. So we talked about earlier, and you said if I just add parallel on here?
Yeah. So I don't know, let's do like 3. Parallel 3.
Cool.
And there's even cooler stuff we can do that we won't do now, like to use BuildKit instead of Docker. And when you enable BuildKit for an environment variable, it's like basically like on turbo. It's really, really fast. And,
awesome.
And great at caching each step. One of the things BuildKit can do with OpenFaaS is if you've got one step to get an SDK down and then build some code, and the last step is to get a runtime and install 3 packages, it will run that bit to install those 3 packages before it's even built the code, because it can look ahead and figure out what it can do in parallel.
Awesome. So one thing I just remembered, so we've already, the actual versions that we have here are already updated. So I'm going to deploy them, and then we can show that rebuild and push and update and see how it can change. So let's go ahead and just deploy our functions using the fast CLI here. All right, so it looks like they were both accepted. And it's always nice to be able to go into the UI here and see these present. So we have the UI function here, which you see just became ready, and then the upload function. So basically what the upload function does is it takes a post request and uploads it to an S3 bucket. In this case, it's going to be an image.
Yeah.
And then the
The use
UI
case
one
for that
presents it.
might be something like you've got a profile picture and you've got a SaaS product and you want to go to the profile page and upload an image. Right? And that's kind of what we're doing here.
Definitely. And one thing to note here is that the functions are just available at this function endpoint. So we can go ahead and do that here. So I have this test image here in the directory. So we should be able to post it. And it looks like it was uploaded successfully. Nice. It gives us back the URL. And now if we hop over here, we can go to the UI endpoint here. And we should see the image we just uploaded. So there it is, success.
That is cool.
And
you created this in a really short period of time, didn't you? Because I know we only talked about this last Friday.
Yep.
Yeah. So, how long do you think it took you to sort of put that together, those two functions?
There's a bit of background info, so maybe like 2 to 3 hours on Saturday morning.
That's pretty fast. I don't think I could even write all the YAML files that I would need for the deployment in 2 hours.
Well, it was helpful to have a lot of the bucket examples that I could use. But we can see here that, let's say if I just post that again.
How do you feel about getting Inlets to open up that URL? Are you worried about doing that?
No, not really. We can go ahead and do that if you want.
Should we try it and see? You have to share, if you can share the command anywhere to do.
Let's see.
Maybe I can do it from my end and then we'll know that it will be a decent image.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. It is a little bit dangerous, but it should be okay as long as our viewers are respectful.
I'll upload.
Okay. So let me go ahead, and we're going to do this later on, but Alex has graciously let me use this. I don't know if it's like a new project, would you say, but basically hosted endpoints for Inlets.
Yeah, so the idea of Inlets is that it's completely open source, but you manage everything, right? You set up the TLS, you set up the droplet for it, or the GCP VM. In this way, what I've done is I actually have my own controller for Inlets that we've built out in the company, and I can just give anyone an endpoint. I've given one to Daniel, and what he'll do is he'll just connect to that. It makes it about as easy as possible to use.
All right, here we go. So it looks like it's connected. So
right. So I want to do curl, and is it -f file equals? And you put an @ do you at the beginning of the file?
Yes, and it has to be a JPEG just because that's how I set it up.
Oh, okay.
So that's something to keep in mind. That is a restriction, part of it making it in
let me see
2 hours.
if I've got this right then.
Okay, hold on. I can also
show me your upload example again.
Sure. Let me hop back over here.
The -f. The curl -f. Oh, yeah. Curl -x post. And then what do I want?
You have to have file and then equals F.
Okay, put equals. Right, I think I'm uploading. I got a URL back on Amazon. Right. That was fast.
Let's see. Let's see if we can see it here. So it should be function.
You just need to take the tunnel bit off the URL.
Right. So, off the TBS tunnel here. So just tbs.exit.
Yeah.
Awesome. All right.
Yes.
Everyone can come view our photos. Nice. All right. And hopefully no one posts anything malicious before I do this update. But let's make a quick change and just show.
We've got a black background, haven't we? What were you going to do?
Yeah, we could make it white if you wanted, or we could, let's see, I'll need to update. Let's make
CSS at the top, I think. And so what we're looking at is this is a HTML file. And again, another thing that you can't do easily with Lambda is just return HTML. Unless it's changed recently, you could only return JSON. And so here we can return binary, HTML, text, whatever you want. And so we're just literally templating a HTML file and dropping a few bits in like you used to do in the old days with PHP.
All
And I
right,
guess
and build
we
list.
can upload the whole stack, but we don't strictly need to. We could actually just do dash dash filter
For the UI.
UI. Let's try that instead.
Okay, so build F, and do I just add that on the end?
Yeah, instead of the parallel. I mean, you can have 3 builders for one if you want. But
Right. So filter, and then is it just
yeah,
UI?
UI.
All right, let's see here. All right, and it should go pretty fast for us here because we just changed
Yeah, it
that.
should do. And as I say, the thing that you can do for build kit is something like docker underscore build kit equals 1. If you just set that environmental variable, that's it. You're set, which I find is pretty cool. We've got a little bit of extra time building here because Daniel, you're using Go modules.
Yeah.
Go modules do download every time. I personally sort of on the fence about them. There is a way of using Go modules where you still have a vendor directory, so your code's all in one place. Really useful if you're doing anything with Kubernetes because it takes forever to download all of that stuff.
All right, so it looks like we've had a successful push, and the last thing we want to do here is redeploy the UI.
Yeah, and all of that can be just done through up.
Right.
I guess
it's all in one
as well. Yeah.
All right, so it looks like that was successful. So
I'm looking again on my end. Yeah, it's white already for me.
There we go. Awesome. Well, that was a pretty easy workflow. I'm glad we got to kind of play with it a little bit while we were going along there. That was fun.
Some people in the chat are saying that's pretty FaaS.
Let's see. We've got a pretty good count here. Anybody new? It looks like Jared and Marcus. Oh, Gerhard, who interviewed us at KubeCon on changelog.
From the changelog.
Yep.
Yeah, the changelog don't want to share any posts that are on medium.com. I think it's kind of interesting that there are a lot of developers that are sort of anti-medium at the time. One of the things I struggle with OpenFaaS is that it's an open source project. Companies don't pay for it. They've got no interest in paying to support it. And so one of the things I've started to do is to put a bit of content on Medium because I can actually get a little bit of revenue by sharing the posts there.
Huh.
This is one of those things that's really tricky. And so to try and support Arcade, OpenFaaS, and Inlets and all these various projects, there's a few stuff on Medium, but that's really just, it's not even pocket money. But the other thing I've got is Insiders Updates, premium newsletter, send out every week with updates about all the projects. So if folks are using any of them or interested in them or just want to hear from me on a regular basis and know what's going on in Kubernetes, that newsletter is a great way to kind of support the work and see it continue.
Awesome. Yeah, that is a really cool thing. Also, it seems like GitHub is really focusing on that sort of like monetization for open source folks, which is cool to see. So I'm interested to see what further advancements they make there as well. All right, so I'm cleaning up these functions here, just deleting them from the UI. And I think this one, yeah, there we go. It's now gone, and we can move on over to doing a little bit more of a sophisticated application that Alex has demoed before, but we are going to combine it with using Crossplane here. So some of this is already done because we already installed Crossplane and we already installed OpenFaaS. But previously we were using AWS. So we had the AWS credentials and the provider running there. So now we need to enable using GCP. So it's going to be very similar. If you hop over here, you'll see the cluster stack install for GCP. We're doing it from master there. And so we can go ahead and install that into our cluster. Let's see here. All right, so let's go into the Crossplane directory here.
I think you had Thomas on your show recently, right, from Linkerd.
Yep.
Yeah, Thomas Thomas is a great guy. He's amazing, and he's helped me a lot with Linkerd actually.
Mhm.
And you can use Linkerd with OpenFaaS. You probably use Linkerd with OpenFaaS with Crossplane if you're really got a lot of time on your hands. But there's a nice lab that we put together, and it shows you how what you might have seen in that last episode applies to Kubernetes, how you can apply that to OpenFaaS as well for splitting traffic between, you had that background that was white and the one that was black.
Mhm.
You could have had a 50% split, and half the users see the white one, half of the users see the black one until we're confident in it and switch over. It's got great metrics and all sorts of things like that. It's part of Plonk as well. So I normally talk about Plonk as being Prometheus, Linux, OpenFaaS, NATS, and Kubernetes. But that Linux can also be Linkerd if you need those sort of features.
Definitely. Yeah, having him on the show was awesome. And I don't know if you've been following any of the stuff they're doing with service mirroring, which basically allows you to expose services in different clusters to each other. There's some really interesting stuff going on. So, and I also love the Grafana dashboards you get out of the box with Linkerd. Lots of cool stuff happening over there.
I've got to ask you, Dan, have you ever looked at the one that you get with OpenFaaS?
I have not.
Oh.
We might have to do that.
Yeah, over on the GitHub org for OpenFaaS, there's a repo called Workshop, and it goes through all the different aspects of using the project, scaling, secrets, some of the stuff Daniel is doing here, and running a dashboard. I think it's like lab 2 or 3. And yeah, you can just deploy it and expose it, get to see it.
Awesome. We might have to do that on a future show even. Wanted to quickly say that I created my GCP credentials. I actually included a script here in this repo that'll allow you to do that if you just have a service account key in the directory. We also are creating a Cloud SQL class and then a claim for that. And we can see this is going to take a little bit longer. It takes longer to provision a Postgres database than it does an S3 bucket. So we can quickly look though and make sure that it is being created. So you can see here that the state of our Cloud SQL database is pending create. So that's going to take some time to come up, but when it does, we will once again, because our Postgres is in the OpenFaaS function namespace, get some secrets there. Alex has already created this with some built-in secrets that he's passing here, and I wanted to be able to use it as he did in his demo with this one as well. So we're actually just going to basically split the PG connection secret that we get from Crossplane and into 4 different, just to make it compatible with his application. You could obviously write your stack.yaml in a way that made it compatible without having to do this. But this was simplest for just extending it.
Yeah, that was a nice patch. And this is the kind of thing that shows how versatile it is, right? You've been able to get it to it with Crossplane relatively short period of time.
Definitely. So it is going to take a moment for this to come up. So I will keep monitoring it. And Alex, I was wondering if we have some time at the end as well, but if there's anything you just kind of wanted to talk about OpenFaaS or any of your other projects, you can feel free to do that or talk about what we're doing here. But hate to put you on the spot, but I'm sure you have something to talk about.
I mean, I can give a quick overview of a few of the top projects.
Sure.
How long do you think that's going to take to load up?
Probably about 5 minutes.
Okay. Can I take the screen?
Absolutely.
Let's see what happens if I try that.
It should let you here.
Now, I could probably do with changing my resolution a bit, but the project that Dan was using earlier is called Inlets, and Inlets is like the tunnels and proxies and VPNs you already know, but it's designed for a cloud native world. It's written in Go, it's open source, it's really easy to use, and it integrates very well with all the kinds of stuff that we're kind of demanding of the internet at the moment. What we did earlier was I was able to get to the OpenFaaS on Daniel's computer, right? And that happened by me earlier running a server. I actually did it in a Kubernetes cluster as a pod, and I got a TLS certificate for it. And then Dan had a service on his local computer and a completely different network behind a firewall behind that in his house. And he basically told an Inlets client to send any requests to his OpenFaaS that had been port forwarded. And then whenever I accessed it from the internet, when I uploaded that photo of myself, should be able to see it on this terminal here. Right, this is what I ran. That went to the public site, hit the pod. The pod had a persistent WebSocket running, and then it went to the client. The client then said, oh, I know where that goes. That goes to OpenFaaS on this laptop. And so it's almost like you get a virtual IP that's completely yours and private, much easier than opening a port on your firewall. And if you go to docs.inletsdev, you see various different use cases that might be interesting. We've got Swag Store, it's 10% off for everybody till the end of the month, 20% off for anybody that's a subscriber to my premium newsletter email. And then some various use cases here, like how do you do SSH, which is useful for Raspberry Pi, for instance. And then I really like this tutorial with an ingress controller. So Dan could go and deploy Nginx on his laptop, right, in that cluster with Kind. He could then get a TLS certificate literally on that laptop through the public IP. There's some exciting stuff you can do with that. The other projects that I'm looking at the moment are all pinned on my GitHub project, or GitHub homepage. Arcade, we've talked about a little bit, so you can go here and find out more about it. Ketchup is used by a lot of people to install K3s, that lightweight Kubernetes. And Derek is quite a fun project. We use it on OpenFaaS. We talked earlier about how do you manage a community. Well, Derek allows you to sort of have a bit less fatigue with your GitHub projects by generating really good release notes for you. He even generates his own release notes. You can have non-admin users without push access help you run PRs and issues, etc. You can detect spam. So during Hacktoberfest, when people are just putting typos in your file to win a t-shirt, it can help figure that out. And it's free. So if anyone wants to try out Derek, he's available there. And then, as I said earlier, we've got various swag in the store, t-shirts, hoodies, etc. The moment this isn't affected by the virus, so you can just go and order what you want off there. And then on AlexEllis.io, you can find out how to get the subscriber's email. This is running through GitHub sponsors at the moment. And you can see a sample of what these are like, what kind of stuff we talk about. We've got updates about different APIs. And this is all under one roof instead of you going through 40 GitHub repos, right? It's the cream of the crop.
Awesome. Thanks for sharing that. And that's perfect timing because our Postgres database is now ready. So I can go back to sharing here. Let me pull this up again. All right, so you'll see here that our Postgres database is bound and runnable. So we should be able to, once again, look at our secrets in the OpenFaaS function namespace. And you'll see we still have that bucket secret, and we now have this PG connection secret. You'll see it has a lot of different data in it, actually, for connecting to this database through different ways. That's because Cloud SQL, for instance, has ways you can connect through the GCP proxy. So there's information for that, but we only need 3 of these since it's a public database. So I'm basically just going to pull these off base64 decode and put them in environment variables, and then we'll create them. And then I'm also going to create this webhook secret, which is going to allow Alex to set up a webhook on a Git repo, which is going to allow you guys to comment on the repo, and we'll see the count of different emojis that you use. So I'll go ahead and start off by creating these, and then I'm going to use the fast CLI here, which in this case is creating Kubernetes secrets. But as Alex mentioned before, it's kind of like an abstraction on the secret platform that you're running against.
Yeah.
All right, so those are all accepted. And so if we actually, once again, because we're on Kubernetes, get the secrets in the OpenFaaS namespace, we should see 4 new ones, each with 1 field. Yep. So we have host, password, username, and webhook secret. All right. So once again, these have already been built and deployed, and we're pulling them from a public registry. Before we do that, we are going to configure the database. So these different functions are using this default DB table. And then Alex has also written up this SQL file here, which basically builds the schema for us. So we can go ahead and do that. You'll see here that I'm actually taking the password that we just pulled off of the secret, as well as the host and username, and I'm passing that. And since it is publicly available, we are able to connect with username and password and run.
Looks good.
All right, so I need to go out one here and created the database, and now we'll run the schema, and we should see, yep, so it created the table for us here. So now we have everything ready to go, the right secrets, the right connection information, database and table setup, and we should be able to go ahead and deploy these functions. And because we're going to use the same inlets that we did earlier, I'll do that in just a moment. The other thing is that we have a port hard-coded for the Postgres database here. GCP on Cloud SQL uses 5432, so I'm just going to adjust that right here.
Yeah, so it's not quite hard-coded. It's actually an environment variable again.
Right.
The point is that you can change it.
Right,
easily.
Exactly. Good point. And since these are in the stack.yaml, I believe that's why I don't have to specify a file. Is that correct, Alex?
Yeah. So if your file is called stack.yaml, we just take that as a default. Otherwise, you can put a -f and put a specific name.
Awesome. All right, so it looks like those were accepted. I need to...
Have you got your inlets tunnel open?
I do not yet, but I am going to do that quickly here. Let's see if I can find that command again.
Probably still in your bash history to just run the client again.
True. Oh wait, it was actually on the file I was in anyway.
Yeah, it was. Okay, so we're just slightly running over time now, but we're very close to the end if people can hang on.
Let's see. Where is it?
It's still in your bash history if you want to.
Oh, I've got it right here anyway.
Yeah, okay, cool.
All right, we're using upstream 8080, which means we're going to forward from 8080. So, all right, it looks like we're connected. And then, Alex, did you want to drop in the...
So I've got the URL. I don't seem to be able to put any URLs into the chat, but there's the URL that on Zoom chat that I just tried. So I'm seeing the row that you put in earlier is showing up on the comments function, and then what's the other? Yeah, it's view function, isn't it, that we want?
Let's see.
The one gives you the raw JSON from the database, UTF-8 encoded to show you the emojis. The other one is called view, and that gives you the tally of all of the emojis.
Let's see. And then is this on the comment vibes?
Yeah.
Let's see here.
It's on here. Zoom. Yeah, it's working as well.
Awesome. Let's see. And let me go ahead and pull up the link address here and let's take a look at it. That is not it. Hold on one second. Let me pull up the chat again. You got to love the Zoom
second link, issues number 3. Right, that's the first one. That's the raw JSON. And then if you look at view.
All right, so we have 2 thumbs up.
Right, and now I'm going to put another emoji. It's on the team serverless org.
Okay.
Proposals.
Here we go.
I'm going to put a rocket. Now I'm going to, it's the 3rd issue you want, TBS. I'm going to put mouse. Right. And then if you look back on the, yeah, on there.
There we go.
Refresh it again. Have we got 2 mice now? 2 mice.
Let's see. Yep. And it's moving up the list. Let me make sure that everyone in the chat has this here. So you can comment on this issue and we should see them all popping up here. Lots of mice. Let's see here. So we've got 4 mice now. Let's see if anyone else in the chat wants to add something. See how many people we have hanging around. All right, it looks like Marcus added, is that a dog or a fox?
It's a fox, I think.
Let's see, and there it is.
And by the way, you can't actually put 2 emojis at once, Jared. You have to do them one at a time because I didn't have enough time to code that.
Jared trying to skirt the system per usual. Oh, wait, it did flow through.
However, oh, yeah, that's weird because I thought I patched that. Unless you're using my old version of the code.
That could definitely be it. I'm not sure.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Yes, because when I was running this, I was building it on a Raspberry Pi. The entire stack we're seeing here, with actually Postgres running on DigitalOcean instead of GCP, was running on 4 tiny Raspberry Pis. Mm-hmm. And that was really over provisioned. There was no need for 4 of them, but it just made it more interesting. Right. Awesome. And that's the thing with OpenFaaS, it's designed to run on any platform.
Definitely. Well, cool. This has been some really great demos we've had here. I hope that everyone in the chat enjoyed it. I think we've given everyone a shout out who joined. Let's see, just to wrap up here. I know you got some time earlier and we're kind of towards the end here. But wanted to once again give you the floor if there's anything you want to chat about, Alex. Otherwise, we can call it a day.
I just say, like, if folks enjoyed this, if you think it's cool, you want to learn more, the best way, even if you're not using these specific projects at work, is to get sponsoring me on GitHub. You'll get my weekly email. I publish all of my tutorials in there. There's exclusive discounts for the store. And it's just a good way of kind of keeping connected, and you'll be able to learn and keep up to date with things like we've got Kubernetes 1.18 coming out this week, and there'll be some links for that as well, and just give you a bit of the heads up on what to expect.
Awesome. Well, I just want to take this time to thank you for coming on. These were 2 awesome demos, and we really appreciate you taking time out of your day and preparing for this. And yeah, it was definitely a joy to have you on, and we hope we can have you on again sometime. And we hope that Crossplane and OpenFaaS can continue to find ways to integrate.
Yeah, so thanks again. Like, the way that you've used OpenFaaS is very is like impressive. Like, you've understood it in a short period of time, been able to put that demo together. I think it's really cool. I'd love to see you do a blog post about your S3 uploader if you're up for that. And yeah, thanks again for taking an interest.
Awesome. Well, thanks, Alex. It's been great. And everyone have a good day and stay safe.
All right. Bye-bye.